Hello, subscribers. We have two special guests today that we're interviewing. We have Matt and Chris from the Lost Sectors. Welcome, guys.
Hi, thanks for having
Hello.
us.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been following your guys' channel for a few years now. I just found out about it, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And man, I wish I knew about it earlier.
Oh, well, we appreciate people watching, you watching. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
I
the
think
first,
I was watching you before I started.
oh,
I want to
really?
say, yeah.
Wow.
I think I found you. Was it maybe fantasy?
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember what game I started you on, but yeah, it was one of the retro RPGs. I'm like,
nice. Cool. Well, the first and most important question is, are you wearing pants?
right now,
Yes.
it is it is COVID. Yes, I am.
I am also wearing pants, but only because I had to do things this morning. But
Okay.
otherwise, it's hit or miss these
Okay.
days.
Nice. All right. So no, the real first question is, so the channel's called The Lost Sectors. Who came up with that, and is there any reason for it?
Uh, Mutual thing. Almost everything we do is a mutual thing. We workshop stuff. We talk about it. Um, there are the reason for it. Why I picked that one to kind of start out with, and my ideas for it were. I remember formatting discs and it saying like five lost sectors or five sectors lost or something like that. And I thought that'd be kind of the tone of what we're doing. We're looking for games that have disappeared in history to kind of talk about and play.
Yeah, that's some of my first IT experience. Like, was scanning discs and seeing that lost sectors. So it seemed to fit.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow, that's great. See,
Excuse me.
Afterwards, though, I had it occurred to me there's another connection for us with that. You know the thing I'm talking about, Matt?
No, I don't.
Well, our guild in Ultima used to be called the Lost Kings,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, when we
and
were
it just
into yeah.
and that was based on in Ultima 1 there were 8 kings in all the kingdoms, and the kingdom on Lord British's island was called the Lost King. And even playing it back then, I'm like, who's this jerk? He comes in and just pushes one guy out. He's just the Lost King now.
the lowercase t and and then uppercase Lost Sector, is that a developer scheme or no?
You mean like in the logo we have? That logo was made for us by a fan. We had no say or input. It was donated. Somebody just was like, I wanted to do something nice for you guys, and we loved it. He had a whole swath of different logos for us, and that was the one that looked most like Forbidden Forest. And
Nice.
so
Yeah, we've actually done very, very little of our own stuff. Like, we barely show up for the shows. Like, the community has there's a Discord, there's a subreddit, and that's all things that people have just started, because they like the show, and I think they like the community of people that kind of participates. I think it's a really great group of people, and it's probably one of my favorite things about the show. And it's we spend a lot of time doing it, and to have someone like sit down and make a really awesome like logo for us, that it means a lot to us. We really appreciated it.
it does. It's I don't want our community to ever think we don't appreciate them because we're so hands off. But one of the things that was sort of important to me when we were doing this is I was watching a lot of other YouTubers get into trouble right around the time people started pushing us for a community. And I'm like, I always want the community to feel like they're they can say whatever they want. If they don't like us or they want to we do something, appalling, I can't imagine, but say we did, they should never feel like we're in there pulling the reins and controlling what people say. I really always wanted it to be a separate thing. So we have no authority or command over our Reddit, our Discord or anything like that. It's all fan run, and it tickles us every time I go in there and see people talking, even if it's not about the show. Just that we brought people together. I love it.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, you can't beat that. That's fantastic. All right, so here's the question that may be offensive to some people, but what
boy.
year what year were you born?
I was born in 1980.
Were you really?
Yeah.
God, for some reason I thought 79.
Oh no, baby. January of 1980, right in the beginning.
74 for me.
74 and 80.
Right at the
Okay.
end, but yeah.
Nice. Where do you live?
Wisconsin is kind of where I'm comfortable letting people know. It's Midwesty.
Yeah, I live outside of Milwaukee somewhere.
Okay. Cool.
I grew up just outside Chicago.
Oh, okay.
That was Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect area.
Uh-huh.
And then my family moved me to the middle of Wisconsin for high school, which was interesting.
Yeah, we have kind of a rural upbringing, I think, in common.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of our gaming tendencies came from, because, you know, there's not a lot of people, and the people that are there, a lot of them are into sports, and maybe we weren't into sports so much, and so it was a lot of gaming.
What about me makes you think I'm not into sports?
Oh, I don't know, everything.
Your
Oh,
demeanor, your physique, the way you look.
That's funny. So that makes me wonder, were you childhood friends then?
No.
No.
I mean, well, for him, because he's so young, but
Wow. We met.
Well, you were what, 16 when we met? I was 21.
I was 16 or 17, yeah. So almost childhood friends.
You had your parents owned a house that had a room, and your brother was there and a couple other people, and so I moved in there for cheap rent, and you were basically just lived there.
I just slept on the couch there.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like I had a home to go to, but I just never went there. I just slept on the couch all the time.
And then I think by the time I was done there were 2 couches in the living room, and you and I would just sleep on couches, even though I had a room upstairs. We would stay up watching Super Globetrotters and falling asleep on the couch after eating Taco Bell.
Yep.
So good times.
Yep. I couldn't do it again.
Oh God, no.
But it was great.
Those days are gone.
Yep.
Have you always, you kind of answered this, but have you always lived in this Midwest area, or were there short periods where you actually lived somewhere else?
Technically, I lived in Missouri for a couple months, but I was way too young to know that. So no, we're just going to say Midwest.
Yeah, I've always lived in Wisconsin. I've lived in a few different places in Wisconsin, but I haven't left yet.
Gotcha. What are your primary professions?
IT director for me.
I am a cloud engineer, so I do AWS stuff mostly.
Nice.
Rainbows, thunderstorms.
Cool. Yeah, I knew Chris.
Wouldn't that be more awesome if that was actually your job? I'm a cloud engineer.
It would be cloud engineering.
That would
magic
be
and stuff. That'd be great. But sadly, no.
No.
No, it's just writing a lot of Terraform.
What other kinds of jobs have you had in the past?
I've done IT pretty much my whole life to some degree. My first job was at a software, etc., and I worked at a hospital doing AS400 stuff, and then I worked at a health insurance software company for like 12 years, and then I worked at Rackspace doing e-commerce stuff. So I've kind of worked all over the IT spectrum.
You do not have enough time for all my jobs. Made pretzels, sold suits, worked retail, been an overnight shipping typist for a port here in town, cook, short order cook, wait staff, movie theater, and
Wow.
then got into IT.
Wow.
Which is where I should have just been.
So
So
so technically you're a bard, you're a jack of all trades, right?
yeah, yeah.
Wow. That's cool. No, that's awesome though. You have so many different experiences with all the different industries and jobs. I'm sure that really changes your perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah. But yeah, as we worked at Software Etc. together, though, I think that was
Yeah, that was a good time.
that was just. I think that was formative for our friendship and just formative for a lot of our views on video games because it was mid '90s, which is just a great time for gaming.
Yeah.
Then you and I worked at Software Etc. and lived together, so we pretty much would get up, go to work. If one of us didn't have to work, the other one would just hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'd go home by way of Taco Bell
Mm-hmm.
and play Duke Nukem until we got too tired, watch Super Globetrotters, and fall asleep. And we wake up the next day and do it again. And that's a good summer. Like,
I'm afraid to go back and watch Super Globetrotters to see if
Oh,
it holds
don't.
up. Have you?
no, it does not.
That's a shame.
Most of our stuff doesn't hold up. I mean, that's been, I think, one of the biggest, I don't want to say disappointments of the show because we found a lot of stuff doesn't hold up. Like Auto Duel.
Yeah.
And but we found other stuff like Lords of Midnight that we'd never heard of that not only holds up but just is solid today.
Mm-hmm.
Not just from a nostalgia factor, but from an actual, it's a good game. It's just a good game. And so getting to bounce around and find all that, how much of our stuff's nostalgia, how much of our stuff's it holds up, how much of it's, I don't know why we played it back then.
Yep.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I had a few games that I played the heck out of them and I enjoyed them at the time because I just did not know any better. I had nothing to compare it to.
Mm-hmm.
You had no
That-
money. You know,
that.
you spent your allowance that you had saved for 6 months on a single game, and you were going to play that game even if it was the worst game in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Plus, when you're young, things you connect emotionally with things in a totally different way. Like King's Quest feels magical when you're a kid, and like I was kind of unnerved by Death Maze, and we've gone back and played both of those, and you can still kind of like get in contact with those feelings going back to it. But when you're an adult and you have like full perspective, you really have to kind of be honest about what it really is like underneath all that nostalgia and those weird feelings that maybe you wish you could get back, and maybe you can kind of touch on them, but it's not the same.
That's the first thing. Anytime someone's like, "This game was great," we don't know what you're talking about. The first question out of my mouth is, "When's the last time you played it? When is the last time you played it?" And if you're having a good time with it, I recommend you don't play it again because
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna be sadly disappointed.
So for the viewers that don't know anything about your channel, just give us a description of your channel.
We purport to run a book club format video game club where we play a different game every month, and then we take some notes. We don't say we're going to beat it. We don't say, we make no real promises, and then we always say that it's not a review, and we get so much flack for saying that all the time, but I think it's kind of an important distinction. But that's what it is. It's a book club where we talk about what we felt playing the game and what we thought of it. And I think in the past probably year and a half, we've kind of done maybe a little more historical research into the games and have kind of tried to add some of that. That's what it is.
I think the book club thing is super important for us. First off, because there were two shows that really influenced the design I brought to you when we wanted to start this. Both are actually involve a YouTuber called Jesse Cox. One was the Co-optional Podcast, where they would get there's three people who were on there pretty much every week/month, and then they'd get a fourth guy to come in and just talk about their stuff that happened this week. And what sold me on we could do this in terms of the amount of time I wanted to spend on a game is Those things are 3 hours long. Like I had never seen a YouTube video for gaming that was more than 15 minutes. Everybody was trying to just smash it in and doing a logarithm and just try and optimize their votes. And these guys are like, I don't care. This is the show I want to do. And his other show was the Star Wars New Canon Book Club. And I'm like, if we did games where we talked for as long as we wanted in a book club format, you know, we would have some. It would be, if not for anyone else, at least for us, interesting. And it gave me a way to kind of con man into playing Deathlord after.
Yeah. The way it shakes out is usually that I have not played these games. You know, when I was a kid, I played a lot of Nintendo, less PC, and especially in the early 80s, I just didn't game a lot. So it's kind of interesting because Chris has a lot of experience with the games and I usually don't. And, you know, for the most part, I welcome trying the new things. Not always. It's not always welcome. But I've learned to forgive him for it. So it works out.
There have been many times we've started up and I'm like, just start. I realized we've gone horribly wrong. Continue.
No, that's awesome. And, you know, for the viewers that aren't familiar with your channel, I personally have described to them, I personally love the way you guys do things and the commentary you have because of your different experiences. And now the 6-year age gap makes more sense as to why your perspectives are a little different sometimes. And it really makes it such a well-rounded commentary because you have someone that in general may have a little less experience with that game and someone that has a lot of experience and totally different perspectives. And as a viewer, that is so fun to watch, especially the way you guys are such good friends and you're always giving little digs at each other. You know, it's great comedy. So,
well, and that's the thing I wanted to say too, past the book club thing. I mean, it's definitely the game and the format that's sort of the front marquee of what we are. But I honestly believe without the friendship part, the thing wouldn't work. This absolutely wouldn't work because we're not just tapping into the nostalgia of gaming. We're tapping into the nostalgia of sitting down together and playing with your friends, which is something that doesn't happen the same way anymore. You don't really sit next to each other and play a game back and forth talking about it like you used to. So this lets us do that. And that's part of why I announce what games we're playing next at the end of every episode, because I want everyone to play. I want everyone to join in and participate in the comments or the communities or wherever you want and be part of all that. Because that's as important as whatever game it is. The games are actually incidental to the being together as a group and talking about them. One of the hardest things for finding us is that game Destiny has a Lost Sectors that's apparently a big part of it. So if you Google Lost Sectors, 90% of all the returns are for that. I'm just like,
yeah,
you should sue.
Part of me is like, I'm just gonna wait them out. There's no way that game's gonna outlast us. It's not that good a game.
Right? We have nothing to do except wait.
One of my favorite quotes of yours is, "I'm a nerd. I have nothing better to do."
Especially now.
Especially now. Oh God, especially now.
So live streaming, you guys also do that. And you also have the short game versus the long game. So yes. Can you describe those two?
So the short game versus the long game was something we added in because previous to that, we'd only putting out one video a month. And we were starting to get an audience and people were wanting more and we were having a good time with it, but we didn't want to burn ourselves out. So I came up with a list of games that I'm like, we're not going to get a month's worth of play out of these games.
Right.
So let's just play them for a day somewhere in there and we'll get together and talk because we don't really have a problem with that. And added that short game in. And that's about the right amount of that. I feel like any more than that, and we would start to feel, because we've got day jobs and other things to do.
Yeah, they're usually really mechanically simple. They might not be short in like duration, like if you played them front to back, but they're games where once you see the core mechanics, then it's just like minor changes as you go
Mm-hmm.
through the game. Uh, but they're fun, and people were requesting them, but nobody wants to play Cannonball Blitz for a whole month. Like you have probably 15 minutes of Cannonball Blitz in you at any given time. I promise.
How long did I played that though so much trying to just figure it out?
Mm.
Oh my goodness. Let me do a quick count here. Yeah, we have like 219 games on our long list, and then another 30 games on our short list, and over 80 requests of stuff. Like we have so many games to get through, and how do you do it? How do you get through all of them? We had to pick up the pace. And then like we were coming into last year, and my plan had been we were going to make Matt start playing Deathlord in November, play through December, and then we do another play in January, because for some CRPGs we do 2 months, a how to play and then a actual play. And I'm like, even 3 months, I don't think he'll finish it. And I think I was right, because you know it took us a year of like 3 hours a week and at least one full day playthrough to get through it. So that's when we started doing the live plays, was for that game.
Yeah, the live play I think is a little more logistically challenging, because like if you think about Bard's Tale, watching someone play Bard's Tale in real time can be really confusing, because it's all first person, and you're taking step after step and you don't know where the person is going. So if there's an auto map, like that would help. But I think Deathlord was like the perfect game for that, because it lasted a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it's strange. It's a little bit strange. It's so difficult. And it was a lot of fun, but we're still kicking around other live stream projects.
We messed with Dungeons and Dragons Online for a time, thinking maybe we'll play with the community. The problem is, if we both play, I feel like I'm not doing either well. It's like, don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And so, yeah, go on.
People join us, and we want to like read the comments and talk to the people. So I think anything really action oriented isn't going to be successful in that format.
Not if both of us are doing it. Like if
Right.
you're playing something and I'm commenting on you and commenting on that, or vice versa, that will work. But so that's why we stopped that. I feel bad, because I really would like to do more with the community. We just have the sweetest group of people.
Just really nice people.
Like, I dreaded when we started this. There's part of me when we first started, like, should I just shut off YouTube comments just before we even see them? Because I heard nothing about how awful YouTube comments were. And while we've had a couple that we like to pick on because they're hilarious, it's honestly been like 99% positive, happy people. And if you go on our Reddit, I've never seen such a supportive, or Reddit too, but the Discord, such a supportive group of people. I just love who we've started with. I think we've got a really good thing, and I hope it stays that way, because it's so good.
Yeah, we'd rather have a handful of great people than thousands upon thousands upon thousands of subscribers, because we want to bring people together in this community around old games, and have space for everyone to like discuss them, and in a supportive way. And I think even when we hate games, we still want people to love those games, even if we hated them, except Auto Duel.
Except Auto Duel. Auto Duel is our go-to whipping boy, because first off, it started with, I think, one of our nastiest comments. But if there's a sassy comment about how we don't know what we're doing, 9 times out of 10, it's on Auto Duel. And it's one of our most viewed videos.
Yeah.
I don't understand that people apparently very much disagree with us, and love watching it. So I don't get it.
Met up with an old friend and told him about our channel, how we're playing old video games, and he's like, "Oh, my favorite old game is Auto Duel. Have you done that one?" And I was like,
You move
"No,
along.
not no, we have not.
We have not. No.
Don't check."
Oh,
Check.
that's
Don't
great.
look. Don't question me on it.
That's great. Yeah, I always find it funny how people can get so offended if you don't like what they like.
Hmm. If you love
Yeah.
an old game, we want you to always love it. And
Yeah.
we would rather you think that we're idiots and assholes who don't know what we're talking about than for you to turn against a game that you loved because we pointed out that maybe the controls are garbage or, whatever.
Or it doesn't hold up, or when you really go back and play it, the graphics are a little jankier than you thought, or the AI is not as good as you remember, or um and that's fine. There are things people can't disagree on and be friends still. Games are not one of them. You can like different games, you can like different movies, you can have different tastes in entertainment. And we have had a couple of games where you and I have vehemently disagreed on the game.
Out
Not
of this
flashback,
world.
out of this world.
That was one of them.
That was one of the biggest. You love that game.
I do. I think I know that it's a fantastic game.
And I am in the minority on it not being a fantastic game. The other one that I didn't like, and I think you did, we just did Rise of the Triad.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously I'm wrong on that. It's getting remade for Switch. So it's
okay.
got a
Like
following. It's
yeah. They say that, every game is for someone. We believe that. We believe that that's true.
Yeah.
And we would love, like, the best thing we could do is give someone the game that's for them.
Yeah.
Even if we hated it.
Yep. And do not take us sometimes tearing a game apart as us not liking it. I think a lot of our early games, or a lot of our early discussions, the more we liked a game, the more we tore at it for some reason. And the less we liked it, the more we tried to prop it up because of exactly what you just said. We want you to find something in the game that you might be interested in.
Out of all the games you guys have played, whether the short game, the long game, or done live streaming on the channel, what are your personal favorites?
I think the best experience I've had has been that Deathlord stream because it was my first time playing it. Chris saved me from a lot of the built-in frustration and bullshit of that game, but I still got to experience it. And the community it was fun to like talk to the people while we were playing it, and it was something I looked forward to every time, and we beat it. And I don't think there's a ton of people who have beat Deathlord, and even though I had help, it was a source of pride.
Nobody
that
beats
we got
that without
through it.
help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hunter is one. I'm just looking through our list here. Hunter's one that I loved and you hated.
Yes. Hunter drove me mad.
Whatever. Looking forward to Airborne Ranger now. Anyway, interstates. So here's one of the things I'm going to say. Interstate 76 is one of the more interesting answers to that question because when we played it back in the day, we loved it. Trying to play it for the stream, for the videos, it's so broken and janky on modern computers that it's unplayable.
Yeah, that's
but
the
I
only.
think if I had to pick a favorite, the thing that keeps popping to the top of my mind is TIE Fighter.
Yeah, TIE Fighter was a fantastic game. I loved it. I think the first game we played was XCOM, and that's one of my all-time favorite games. So I would say of our games that we've played, not counting the stream, I think it might be XCOM.
Questron's good.
Questron's fantastic.
Shard of Spring invoked something in me, and so did Rings of Zilfin. Rings of Zilfin hooked me in a way that I didn't expect, and I still when I think back to it, gives me happy feelings. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It tapped a nostalgia for a game I never played before, and so, and this is why, like, I can't answer your question.
No, I understand. I understand because people ask me the same question sometimes. They're like, "What's your favorite game?" It's like, okay, I'll throw it into some categories for you. How about that? Out of these
Yeah.
5 categories, this is my favorite, and then this one. And so, no, I
Well,
totally understand.
I think at our age, there's no more favorites of anything. My daughter will ask me all the time, "What's your favorite show? What's your favorite book? What's your favorite food?" I'm like, ask me today, it'll be a different answer tomorrow. I have different standards and different things. They're just things I like because I've experienced them.
And
And
that's
the more you do, the less it happens. So
yeah, and that's fine. I mean, and that's a perfectly valid answer. For some people, that is the answer. For others, they know this is my favorite game.
I envy them.
Totally.
I envy someone who has a game. This is my jam. This is my game. I'm going to throw myself all the way into it. I kind of had it with Ultima for a while, just the series in general. And I'll be perfectly honest, the fandom has ruined that series for me.
Yeah, there's some salty Ultima fans out there. There's a lot of really, really wonderful Ultima fans
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Definitely. But there's a vocal minority of Ultima fans, I think, that are really intense about it.
Yeah.
And that can be hard to,
Yeah.
you know.
It just sort of knocks it out. The Bard's Tale fandom I found was incredibly welcoming and good. So that's interesting. I know fandom's not necessarily what makes a game, but if you're going to be online and trying to be like in some sort of community, the fandom matters and who they are matters. And
Did Lords of Midnight? The Lords of Midnight people were
really good
so
fandom.
nice.
So nice.
When we played that for the first time, and a lot of people commented, and there's still people who found us on that video that we're very grateful that they're there.
One of our 2 developer videos, which I'd love to do more developer videos. That would be so good, but it's hard to get them to want to, because I would interview a Garriott, I would interview a Brian Fargo, but I'm more interested in Sarah Jane Avery or Catherine Matega.
Yes.
And I don't think we're going to get her. She's not interested. I'd be interested in Alex Scurzio from Deathlord. I want the people haven't heard of. I want someone like, here's a developer that's not the big tentpole name from the 80s, but still really important to the 80s or 90s. Yeah.
That's awesome. I did not know that you had 2 developer videos. Wow.
One for Lords of Midnight, and he is actually the guy who's sort of custodian of the IP right now.
Okay.
Because the original developers passed away. So he's sort of taking care of it and keeping it going. And then the other one we had is
Mark Clemmert.
Chris Wilde was for that. Mark Clemmert is for Nox Archaist. It is a upcoming Apple II RPG in the style of the Ultima series, and also Wisconsin based. But super sweet guy. And I just wanted to do something interesting back then where we were like, well, the game isn't 20 years old, but he's making it for the Apple II, which is. So let's bring him on and talk about it.
Do you like the direction everything's going right now?
Do you have any plans, Matt? I've got a couple in mind.
I have what I consider to be a hilarious live stream idea that I don't know if it's going to get traction, but I think that's about the only machination I have for
Spring it to us all right now, man.
You want to know?
Yeah, I do want to know.
I want to play a community source playthrough of the game Dallas Quest, which is based on the 80s sitcom Dallas. Datasoft owns the intellectual property for a bunch of weird things, like they owned Goonies and Bruce Lee, and one inexplicably is Dallas. So there's this kind of like mystery game based on Dallas that I think it would be fun to like have the community like guide us through it, and we'll all kind of get together and find answers to who shot JR or whatever the hell it
Whatever
is.
the question is. Keep harping on me about that because I love the idea and I keep forgetting about it. So
But we'd have to have firm promises that no one look up
I know.
spoilers. So there's a lot of trust involved
Are
in a
there
Dallas
spoilers?
Quest
Do you
playthrough.
think anyone sourced a Dallas Quest walkthrough?
I'm sure it's on GameFAQs or something. Like there's someone out there who their favorite game is Dallas Quest, and they have documented it very intricately. I promise. Are you looking up?
Yeah, there's a
don't look
guide
up
and
spoilers.
walkthrough. Bummer.
Of course there
All
is.
right. Of course there is. Okay, well, no looking it up when we do it. That's all we're asking.
Yeah, close that window right away.
Yeah, I just looked at the title. I just saw that there was a link and I'm good. But the fact that there's a link makes me sad and happy because it means that's another game that hasn't vanished into the ether. Like I could see something like Seamus or Stellar 7. It's one of those old games that just, if you were there at the time and you played it, you remember it, but no one's thinking of like, I wonder if there's going to be a new Seamus game coming out. Like, I don't know that Matt would have ever known of Bozo's Night Out if it wasn't for, what's the one we just did?
Street Beat.
Street Beat.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Beatbox, but that's a different thing. Yeah, Phantom Karate Devils. That's a game everyone should go out and know about. I'm not saying play even. Just know it's there.
for the sheer weirdness of it.
The sheer weirdness of it. It's one of the first sort of side view fighting games. And you're playing a giant karate guy on the Commodore 64, and you kick and you punch and ninjas come at you. And every move you do lowers your energy by some. It's a real-time fighting game, but you have to like pace your moves against how much energy you have left. Finishing a level restores some, and then you got to get through the whole game on that. And this game was like $30 back in 1980. And the last level is just literally, they just randomly put characters up on the screen, said you're inside the computer and you got to fight nothing. And then you win or die, and it's hard to tell why.
Wow.
It's way less cohesive than even you made it sound. Like
I know,
it's just
I made it sound like
nightmare.
a game.
Yeah, it's a fever dream of a game.
The one project I keep having in my mind, and I can't figure out how to do well, is my map series. How to draw old school maps on graph paper and sort of, it sounds like you shouldn't need to teach people how to draw squares and lines, but the act of translating what you're seeing on the screen to a piece of paper is not something that's handed down or shown or taught, or you have a friend who knows how to do it or did it or can give you some tips, because it's just not done anymore. And I stand by, like people have said for Bard's Tale, there's a map system, and same with like Curse the Azure Bonds and stuff. There's stuff where you can have the map up alongside you and see what you're doing. And that takes some of the magic out of it. Like I still have all my old hand maps because they're like a journal of my time then. They're something I keep with my notes, and I can remember, oh yeah, I remember having that puzzle and why I had to like jot all these things down. Might and Magic has the page where I finally figured out what their keys meant. Because if you played the first one, there were some things called like the gold key 1, gold key 3, gold key 2. And it looks like just random numbers and letters. And I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out how to put these keys together. Till one time I decided, okay, I'm going to write them in order. And I sat down and I wrote them. And I wrote them like they appeared on the Commodore screen at first, which was like 3 lines under each other. And it didn't work. But then I stretched them all out longwise and realized you read down to decipher the sentence, and just felt really stupid and hated the game, but suddenly knew what I needed to do.
Yeah, that's cool. Have you ever done any videos, either of you guys, where you show physical collections of things you had from childhood?
Chris occasionally trots out a game box or a manual, but I don't think we've done anything really, in the material world.
Yeah, not much beyond just if you look over my shoulder, there's this giant collection of Atari games and Intellivision games and some Nintendo. But my computer games, my Commodore PC, big box stuff, I actually keep that at my day job because I have kids and I value them and I don't want them destroyed.
Right. You value the computer games, not the kids, right?
No, I would, otherwise I'd keep them at my day job.
That's right.
Oh, that's good. What is the oldest memory you have in regards to games? It could either be a video game or a tabletop game.
I remember my earliest video game memory is actually not me playing. It's my mom and my brother were both in our computer room, and I think they were playing Parsec on, I think it was the Commodore, but I might be wrong. And I got very upset that no one was paying attention to me. And so I retrieved my He-Man action figure, and there was one where if you push the head down, it sprays water out of the mouth, and I sprayed it on my face to try to make it look like I was crying. And I went in the bedroom or in the computer room and pretended that I had been crying because I was being neglected so badly, and nobody cared, and they just were playing Parsec. I was like, computer gaming, that's for me.
That is the most family thing ever. Like from the kid faking it to the parents being like, yeah.
Whatever, we're playing Parsec.
Playing Parsec.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. My earliest video game memory is maybe my earliest memory. There might be like one or two before that, but it's playing a game called Fire Truck in the arcade. And I had to be like 3. And it's a driving game from Atari. There's a hook and ladder thing, so one guy can stand in back and steer the back of it, and another person has to drive up front and steer the front of it. And I wouldn't say it's a great game, but it's probably my first interaction with video games.
Cool. Do you remember, Matt, your first game that you played?
I remember playing Robotron at my cousin's house on the Atari, and that blew my mind. I thought it was just fantastic, and it was kind of scary because all the robots were coming at you. That was a good time.
Nice.
Robotron's a solid game.
Yeah. Does it talk? Is it Robotron that talks? Get the humanoids.
No, that's Berserk.
Berserk, yeah.
Yes, I also loved Berserk, but I'm sure it was Robotron that I was playing as a kid. And my cousins.
Nice. Well, this question will kind of apply, but Matt already gave a really funny experience. But do you have any funny or interesting gaming related experiences?
I mean, I have another one. I talked about it in our Dark Lord video, but one night I was playing Dark Lord in my room, and I was typing dirty things into it, as one does. And there was a rat, and I typed "rub dick on rat." And my dad walked in right at that moment. And instead of playing it cool, because he wasn't going to look, my hand flew to the screen. I held it up over it and refused to move it. And my dad just like shrugged and walked out of the room.
Oh,
you still have the shirt?
Yeah, Chris sent me a shirt with the rat from Dark Lord, which doesn't look like a rat at all.
No, looks like some weird pixel turd.
But it says "rub dick on rat," and I still wear it.
So I made it on Cafe Press, and I got it sent to you. And I'm glad you got it, because literally like the day after you got it, they're like, "We found your content obscene. We're taking it down."
Oh no! And that's why we never made millions of dollars on those rub dick
on our
on
rub
rat
dick on rat
shirts.
shirts. Yeah, it was going to be the first Lost Sectors merchandise.
Yeah.
I think the mad embarrassing story I have is, do you remember us doing gambling for Duke Nukem 3D?
Yes. Yeah, we had a small wager.
We had a small wager because you would kick my ass, and I'm like, I could beat him if I wanted to. And everybody at Software Etc. went, "No, you can't." Came in the next day and collected all my monies.
Yep, you did win. I have to admit it. It's important to
And
admit defeat when you've lost. That's
joke's on
pointed.
me now. The game makes me nauseous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing about older games that, you know, the younger generations that haven't played them, they do not know what defeat and try again means. You know, it's
Yeah.
just kind of handed to them, and oh, you died, that's okay. You know, don't worry about it. Here you go. Here's everything restored the same way. And
Mm-hmm.
I
I
think there was a small window of that, but when I hear that argument a lot, and there's definitely like Nintendo era, computer era, where I think the technology didn't let certain things they would have put in to make it easier on us in. But if you look at like the Atari games, there were teddy bear levels, there were little kid level settings. Um, and then today we have games like Dark Souls or Phasmophobia, which we're getting the hang of, but
mm-hmm.
definitely will eat you if it wants to. I think if you look, you can still find a challenging game. And I think if you look back then, you'll find games that were pretty easy. They just weren't the popular games because there's a sense of it's not that there weren't both kinds of games then. It's just that the games that are going to endure are the ones that make you feel like you've accomplished something.
Yeah.
You're not going to hold on to a game that you just sort of blew through. It's not going to be something that lasts 5-10 years from now.
There is a pattern in gaming. There's some games that you learn by dying constantly. Like Hotline Miami is the perfect example. Like Hotline Miami is about getting killed over and over and over again and finally figuring out like the best way through it. And a lot of games, I think that was a more common pattern in older games, uh, where it was just like, oh, you're dead, figure it out. You got to find a different way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think probably because the stories are richer and there's more offered, you could say, in modern games, that's kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit, I think.
Well, and that's one of the things I was thinking about actually the other day because I was thinking about CRPGs and just how they've changed over time, where story is so important that they've created sort of linear paths through the game where you have something like Deathlord and it's your objective is over the horizon. Will you give me a direction? No. And I don't care how long it takes you to get there. And I don't care if you ever go there. If you're having fun on your adventure, game done. You know, Ultima 3, Deathlord, Ultima 4, even to some extent, even though it had more of a story, it didn't care. Questron, you knew there was a big bad somewhere you had to go kick, but you also could have just gambled and raided towns your whole life, joined his side, basically. Fantasy, another one. Just you got to get these rings to stop the evil overlord, but what if you didn't want to? What if you just like bombing around dungeons, raising levels? Might and Magic, the first one. There was, I don't think you were even told there was a plot. You were just given a game and told, enjoy. And you eventually found there was somebody who needed some smacking, but if you never found them, you didn't have a bad time. But if you want to play a game like Dragon Age or, you know, Skyrim, even though Skyrim's got this huge open world, you're still always, there's always this urgency to the main story that's supposed to keep you driving along. And like anything else, which is better? I don't know. Which is better, platformers or RTS? It's personal preference.
do you have a general timeline of your personal experience with your gaming platforms you had over the years? So, like, did you start with an Atari, an NES? So, Matt, you want to go first?
Yeah, we had a few computers growing up that I was too young to really engage with. Um, the first thing I ever remember playing was the Apple II. We had it was a Laser 128 Apple II compatible computer, uh, and so we had that for many years, and it finally broke, and we couldn't get it fixed because no one had parts for the Laser 128.
Mhm.
And then I went to a friend's house and I saw Wolfenstein 3D, and I heard the voices and I saw the death cam, and I went home and said we have to get a PC computer, and we did, and we got a Packard Bell Legend 486 SX with 4 meg of RAM, and I loved it.
Mhm.
And it was fantastic, and I played the hell out of it. And then we got a Gateway Pentium 90, and then there were a few computers in there, and now I've had so many computers that I can't even remember them all. But yeah, that was my path. And I had a Nintendo in there. I never had an Atari. I messed around with the Genesis for a little bit. You know, I had a lot of consoles. The one I played the most was definitely the Nintendo, though. I was a big Nintendo fan.
Nice.
I think I had a cousin who showed me like the VIC 20 back in the day. And it was probably the start on me going, there's something here, you know. And then I got an Atari, but my friends around me had either a TI 99 or an Odyssey, because I grew up in Chicago, like I eventually went rural, but the Chicago area, I had a lot of friends with a lot of stuff. And so I got to see just all these different types of computers. And when we'd go to the mall, I'd play on the Radio Shack while my parents went and did something. Just typing in Chris rules, go to 10. In fourth grade, we were allowed to skip recess and do an Apple II computer club class. And I did that for about a week before someone came in with a program that made their name show all over the screen. And I felt really stupid and went back to recess, which is hilarious because now I look back and I'm like, someone needed to tell you to tough it out. Someone needed to tell you didn't have to be the best. I missed a lot of opportunities. So if there's any kid out there listening, stop worrying about whether you're the best. Do what you got. So I went through that through like most of my childhood. And when I got to 7th into 8th grade, I met one of my friends who had a Commodore 64. I had a couple of friends before with a Commodore 64, but this one hyped up Ultima 3 to a level I can't explain. And he didn't even have a copy of it. He played it at a friend's house over a summer. And then I moved in. And then him and I basically talked about Ultima 3 for a year until he went to a summer camp for robotics and came back. He's like, someone's going to send us the Ultima 3 disc. I'm like, yes. And so we waited for about 2 months that entire summer, checking the mailbox every day for that Ultima 3 disc. And finally he wrote the kid, he's like, are you ever going to send it? Kid's like, here it is, jerk. I was out of the country for a month. He's pushing me for this disc. That's all that's important to you. And we apparently ticked him off and we feel bad, but he did send us the disc. But Lord British's castle didn't work. So we couldn't raise our hit points at all in the game. So we beat the game without having a working copy because we just were so hyped for this game. I would load, he had like the boot disc, but not the scenario disc. So for that year, I would load it up and just listen to the music and go, wish I could play this game. And so, yeah. And like when I got the Commodore around that time, that was what I had until after I met you, Matt. Like, I didn't have a PC until my mid-20s. So I missed a lot of the 90s buying games for myself and then
Wow.
got them.
Do you prefer to play games by yourself or with others?
Yes.
I think I tend to prefer to play games by myself, or with pretty much just with Chris. Like Chris and I play modern video games together, but it's rare that we play anything with the general populace. It's usually just me and Chris in a cooperative game, because I think. Do you think we're both very subtly competitive, or maybe not so subtly?
You and I have always had an interesting competitive relationship where, like, I remember was it Daytona USA, or was it, no, Daytona is the one that I made the kid do the cartwheel. It was what's the one,
Road Racer or something
Road
like
Racer,
that.
something like that. That was in the arcade when we worked at Software, etc. And we held the high score in that game, and we played it so much and so well that we know the car on the left is 100th of a second faster than the car on the right. And I mean, we knew it to that level of how these cars steered and controlled. And we got there by, one of us will figure something out, use it to crush the other one like 2 or 3 times, and then tell the other one how we did it to bring the game back up to a balance. And it's because we like the energy of pushing ourselves to be better, but we don't want to leave the other one behind. And I think that's really cool for us.
We also have a very different approach. Chris is very measured, very cautious, and I'm very much running guns ablazing with no regard for consequences. You could say that he's better, but I don't like to think of it that way. I like to think of it as a difference in approach.
Well, I think the best example of our difference of approach was when we tried that Mech Warrior level that one time. Do you remember that? We were playing Mech Warrior 5, and we were both stuck on this level, I think, for days. Because we're playing as a team and we're trying to get through it. And he's trying to go in as fast as he can, and I'm trying to like measure my way through it. And up till now, that's worked, but we've got this level where it's not working. And I'm like, we have to commit either your way or my way. And he's like, okay, we're doing my way first. I'm like, fine. Then I'm reloading the game and we're doing it my way, and I want to see which one's better. We finished the level in like 5 minutes with me dragging one good leg to the dropship to get out. And like, I just leap. The rest of the team's dead. My mech is nearly destroyed, but we did it in about 5 minutes, and it was done and over, and we could move on. Then we loaded up my way. It took about 45 minutes. Everybody made it through. Which is better? You can get on with your day in 5 minutes, or you don't have to pay for repairs. It's just a different way of doing things, and which way was more fun? Gun to my head, probably Matt's way was more fun.
It was definitely more of an experience, I think.
It's definitely more of an experience. Both work. Both have some insight, something to share. So I remember Ultima Online, we would compete but not compete because it was an MMO we were a team on. And I'm like, I took out an ogre last night. You're like, no, you didn't. Like, I did. It's like, all right, when we get back, you're going to show me how you took out an ogre. We went back and I started fighting, and he's watching my hit points just drop like a rock. And he's like, see? And then all of a sudden they pop all the way back up. He's like, how did you do that? I said, I used Band-Aids. He's like, bandages.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Who knew you should use the healing mechanic built into the game?
I know, crazy talk, but it's the sort of thing where that's it. We like taunt each other with, I can do something better than you, and then here's how I did it, because we're not really competitive. I don't think we even really play competitive games much anymore. We kind of don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like Phasmophobia or Orcs Must Die. We tried PUBG for a while. That was always interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris,
PUBG
what about
just scared
you?
me.
Do you
Oh, sorry,
prefer
go
playing by yourself or with someone else?
I would say right now, my most fun playing games is playing with Matt. I'd rather play with Matt. But play with someone else in general? No, I'd rather play by myself.
Do you prefer tabletop games or video games?
I think I prefer video games. I've had a lot of fun with tabletop games, but I don't have a close community of tabletop friends. I've done some tabletop gaming with people around, and there's a few like good board game bars back when you could leave the house, and I enjoyed that. But I never had that really intense board game community, and I think that's really key to being super into board games.
5 years ago, I would have said tabletop. And I think it's much like I no longer feel a need for competitive games. I just can't be bothered to have that much energy into a game. It's not fun for me anymore. Even RPGs, which I love, they're my bread and butter. And I remember as a kid just dying for someone to play with, especially once we moved to Neilsville. I don't know that I'm ever going to play one again. I just don't have the love for them I had.
Gotcha. So, what are your favorite genres of games?
I nowadays I tend to lean toward like I had a blast with Mountain Blade Bannerlord. I played the hell out of that. That's kind of a unique genre, uh, but I really like it. It, otherwise, I like open world RPGs. I find myself playing a lot of those just because I like to engage in things and forget that I exist for a while, and those games are really good for that kind of thing. But yeah, that's usually what I play.
I want to say RPGs, but an example of what I've come to hate about them is Solsta Crown of the Magister, which is a new game I kickstarted. And the combat seems really fun, but to start it up was create your party, which takes about half an hour. And then they put you in a bar and you've got to go through a tutorial to learn how to do all this, which takes another half an hour. Then they're like, okay, the adventure can begin. I need you to go into town and go talk to this person. And they've built this huge town you've got to walk through. And you wind your way through and you get there. And it's taken another 15 minutes to get to this place. And then they start a conversation where they make fun of you for not knowing how things work in the game yet. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I don't care how great the rest of your game is. You have not respected my time. And I feel like a lot of modern RPGs do not respect my time. And that's too bad. You need to get me in and get me going with something, anything. That's what I liked about Ultima 3 or Deathlord or Ultima 5. It's like, you're in the game, begin, and you can just start playing and do whatever you want. So in my heart, I still want it to be RPGs. But I'm kind of with Matt on like Mountain Blade's really good. I don't know if you guys haven't looked up a game. I mentioned it once already. It's called Phasmophobia. I don't know what that genre would be because it's not horror. I don't like necessarily scary horror games, but there's a cooperative strategy, thought, deductive thing to it, but it's not an RPG. But there's some real-time actiony stuff to it. I don't know what it is, but I love it.
I
Is
also
it
love just weird. Like one of my favorite games is Papers, Please, because it's weird. It shouldn't be fun, and in fact, it might not be fun now that I think of it. But
Oh, it is.
It's so well done, and it's a work of art. Like it's really just fantastic. I think that's one of my favorites, and I like Hotline Miami was kind of the same way. I know I mentioned that earlier too, where it's so weird. It's like a David Lynch movie almost.
Yeah.
And it's gross and ugly, but fantastic. I really like kind of artsy fartsy kind of games like that.
Yeah. If indie is a genre, then it's indie. There's almost never a big budget, big name game I'm looking forward to other than Cyberpunk.
Obligatorily
Cyberpunk. I think mostly though, just because there hasn't been a really good Cyberpunk game of any kind, and Witcher 3 was so good that I'm going to trust them to do a good job. But yeah, all the stuff I like and play right now is either mid-tier or indie. There's just not a lot of mainstream games I care about.
Do you get tired of having to learn the new rules for each game? So like you're talking about the RPG where you had to go through this tutorial for 30 minutes and that. Is that part of what makes you not want to play a new game that has a different system as Oh gosh, and I gotta learn. It's similar, but it's different, and all the nuances.
Oddly, no. In fact, learning new nuances and learning new things is one of the most, it's the moment I'm most excited about the game. What am I going to learn? What am I going to see different? How is this going to challenge me and make me think differently? And I think that's why I'm not in favor of a lot of AAA, because there's never going to be that magic moment of, I get it, bandages, or I get it. There's this mechanic that I didn't totally understand, and now that I do, it's brilliant and I love it. Um,
I personally get tired of learning everyone's crafting implementation and every role
that's
playing
fair.
game. I get sick of that. Like, oh, do I have to? What am I going to be collecting? Is it like, am I looting corpses? Am I picking berries? What am I doing? I get
That's
tired
fair.
of that. That can get irritating and boring. And I also don't really like learning combat systems in modern RPGs. They're usually really fun once you get the hang of them, but I don't really feel engaged when I'm learning those new things. But I love discovering the world and the tone of the game and the writing and the plot and how the dialogue works. I That's what I like to learn and
Yeah.
engage with. But man, I just like I don't want to learn what kind of table I have to stand at to make a potion. Like I just don't care.
The crafting system, you got a really good point on that, because 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, you're not crafting. You're collecting and pouring into a bucket and then pulling a lever to get an item out the other side. You're not crafting something. Um, Before Minecraft had recipe books, I felt like that was crafting, because you had to put stuff on there and try and figure out, okay, if I put these things in this order and do this thing, then I get something. That is interesting. The internet kind of ruins that though, because you can just look it up.
Mhm.
The only other crafting system I'll call out as interesting, is good, but ends up falling apart over time, was Star Wars Galaxies. Um, you knew, like, to make a pistol handle, you were going to need some plasticine and some metal. And you would go and collect metal and plasticine. And it sounds like, oh, you're still just pouring it in a mold and calling it. Every metal and every material had different properties of hardness and flexibility and weight. And so when you could literally look at your components, decide how you wanted to put them together into an item, and then that item that came out would have different stats based on the things you put into it. You felt like you were crafting something. End of list.
Yep. And now it's gone.
And now it's gone. That's not a thing anymore because people want to pour stuff in buckets.
So earlier you were talking about, Chris, how it depends on your mood that day, what kind of game you like. Do you have this is for both of you? Do you have days where you just want to play something mindless that's super easy, and then you have other days where like, you know what? I want something really challenging that really makes me have to think. And if so, what are the ratios on those?
Before we start, you know what game lets me do both? Darkest Dungeon.
Hmm.
I love that game for that, because you can definitely pick a really hard mission and go in and it will kick you if you are not on your toes. Or you can go in with like an easy mission that's short and just blow through and not worry about it too much. Um, I do love Darkest Dungeon for that. The ratio, though, is the harder it is, the more interested I'm going to be. But there are days where, yeah, I want something mindless.
Yeah. For me, it depends. So I find it as I get older and I have more responsibility, I find it harder and harder to really devote the time it takes to lose myself in a game, and that's really sad to me, but it's very true. So I definitely play a lot of just quick. I'm going to mess around with this game for a little bit. But like when you have games with long storylines, like I'm playing The Witcher 3 now, I'm like the last person on earth to play it, I know, but like if you dump yourself back into that game after taking a lot of time off, like it's got a quest log and everything, but you're not engaged. You don't have that mental list of all the things that you've done that you want to do, and so that's a bummer. but I've had some time off lately, so I've been finding myself gravitating more to that escapist, in-depth kind of gaming.
Well, and that's one of the things I miss about old CRPGs, like we were talking about. Like once you get to the gold box games where there's a story and things you got to follow, if you leave it and you come back in, where were you? What is the thing you got to do? Do you remember? Where with Ultima 3 or Might and Magic, you leave it and you come back in, who cares? Start if you don't remember, start again. Like do what you don't remember and you're fine. Bard's Tale, drop all the quest items and start again, and the game just lets you start again, and you just play it because it's a game.
What does it take, in your opinion, to make a really good game?
I think you need a solid world. You need character development is so important. That's that Skyrim noise that plays when you level up. Like that's a carrot. Like you want to hear that, and your brain like releases chemicals when you hear it. You need that kind of stuff, and you need to feel like you're working towards a goal with your character and getting new things. And sometimes you can do it with loot, and sometimes you can do it with stats or skills or whatever. But I think that's so important because that to me is usually more engaging than the plot. Like I want to deal 10,000 damage. I want to kick ass. That's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Even
So
in a game like Darkest Dungeon, where you're not doing 10,000 damage, where it is every inch of it is scrapped forward, you need a sense of permanent progress.
yep.
And that ding noise that goes off.
Does it have to be challenging, or can it be just progress?
Well, here's the question. Are we talking about a good game or a popular game?
A game that, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, you could answer either way because the question was pretty ambiguous.
Because if it's a popular game, no, it doesn't need to be a challenge.
Yeah.
There's something to be said though. As I get older, my willingness to play games on easy mode, like totally. Like when I play uh, uh, Bannerlord, I take way less damage in combat than anyone else, and it's still not a power fantasy, but like I want to be there for it. Like I want to experience it, and the point is not to me the point is less nowadays how good am I at fighting and how deft am I at the controls. It's the overall you know development and experiencing the game that I care about. So I think you can have an easy game that still is rewarding in that way, but I will say that when it's hard, every little bit of progress you make feels so good. Like when you finally beat the thing or you finally get that last like 10 experience points, it's a huge deal. And when the game is hard, that experience is way better.
There needs to be Dark Souls and there needs to be Bejeweled. There needs to be both sets of games in the world, not just for different types of people, but for the same person. Because I don't always want to struggle. I don't always want XCOM 2 on Iron Man. Sometimes I want something that just lets me just go in there and bum around for a little bit.
So to kind of try to wrap it up with what makes a good game, what are some things that that in your mind automatically make a game terrible? What are some game breaking either uh, ideas that are put in or mechanics or whatever it is?
We've kind of said it already, but the first thing any game has to do, and it's not something that's going to make a game good, but it will immediately make a game bad, is if you don't respect my time. If you make things just take time just to take time, like I understand gold sinks, I don't understand time sinks. Definitely not in a single player game, and it happens way too often.
Yeah, janky controls definitely. Like I I feel like a fogey, but I don't like playing things with a controller. Like I just I don't like to do it. I want to use keyboard and mouse, and so like any game with poor controls or any engine game engine that I feel like I'm fighting against makes me crazy. Like, people love Resident Evil, but sometimes in that game you're not fighting zombies, you're fighting the game engine.
Mhm.
And it's effective at doing some things, but it drives me nuts. Like to have to deal with, the technology instead of the story or the adversaries in the game.
I will say, and this is kind of dovetailing off Matt's point here. One of the debates I've gotten in with people over the years is the word immersion. And people think immersion means realistic. Immersion means I stop thinking about it as a game. It means I'm not thinking push stick up. The moment I think push stick up, you've broken immersion and you have a bad game. Pac-Man is immersive, not because I believe I'm eating dots, but because I'm not thinking about moving that stick anymore. I'm thinking about moving, and I'm one with what's happening on the screen.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's a really good way to put it. The immersion.
Yeah, and I remember having I was a backer for Shroud of the Avatar, and I tried to explain this to the dev team and stuff. They're like, my problem isn't that it doesn't seem believable, some of the stuff you're doing. I mean, that is a problem, but you're making an interface that's unimmersive. In the next breath, going back to Lords of Midnight, you've got everything about that game is thought about in terms of being part of the world, down to the reason you can control other armies is you have a ring of command that lets you do that. It wasn't just waved away as, of course you can, because it's a strategy game. No, he explained why it's there and how it happens. And there's a mechanic where if you lose the ring, you can't control the armies anymore. So stuff like that will elevate your game. It won't make it good on its own, but it can take an average game and step it up.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does nostalgia improve experience when you play a game?
When I play a game?
When you're playing a game, when you sit down and you're playing the game, how much does nostalgia for that game impact how much you like it on a scale of 1 to 10?
How about you, Matt? You got an answer on that before I go?
I want to say I think it's probably about like 4. We are constantly butting up against nostalgia and the difference between objectively looking at a game and the nostalgia of a game. And like I'm definitely guilty of it. When we talk about Out of This World, like that, I played that as a kid on the Super Nintendo and it blew my mind. And you can't come back to that and be totally objective afterward. But on the other hand, like when you're playing it, when you're in it in modern times as an adult with all this perspective, like nostalgia tends to get a little bit overruled by just your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably with you on the 4 thing, because we have some games like Ultima 3 that I can look back on and go, it's a fine game, but 90% of what I like about that game is nostalgia. On a other part of the triangle, I'll even say, we have a game like Rings of Zilfin, which I did not play as a kid. And nostalgia, it's a nostalgia for a time. It's a nostalgia for a time of gaming. And playing that game, it's so that time that even though I never played it before, it still triggers all those nostalgia endorphins. And then there's games like Strike Commander or games like Auto Duel, where nostalgia can't save it. Like, just can't. It's just not going to make it.
And with Rings of Zilfin too, we had the experience where neither of us had played it. Yeah. So we were exchanging text messages about things we were finding. Like that's what the nostalgia is. It's the experience, and that we were having that kind of like 80s thing where you meet your friend at school and compare notes about what you've been doing and share your findings.
Like you sit down at lunch and pull open the spiral notebook and like, did you get to this dungeon?
Right, totally. And we could have that with Rings of Zilfin.
Um, what I wish we could do more that we can't do is time. Because it's a month, I would love to have had a year of Rings of Zilfin experience. I would love to have just him and I over a year compared notes and found new things and played it together and had that really eighth grade experience. But you can't do one show a year. You know, it's
Yeah.
so.
Yep. And 30 years from now, you'll have nostalgia from the YouTube channel you're doing right now. You'll be like, man, I remember when Matt will be like, I remember when Chris and I were doing this YouTube channel thing. And
Yep. Yeah, that's scary. Scary to think about.
Just my digital head because I've neo neuro cyber shamaned it.
Yep.
Are there any game mechanics that you can think of that were revolutionary at the time? And when I say that, I mean you actually experienced them. So you were at that point in time when the game came out, and that was the buzz, and it was revolutionary, and you have memory.
I mean, you get a revolution every 10 years on the fives, has been my experience. So 75 to 85, 85 to 95, and on and on and on. Some of them have been good, some of them have been bad. MMOs, Ultima Online and EverQuest, you knew things have changed. I'd played MUDs before, I'd seen Meridian 59 in the store. There were online games like that before, but those changed everything. Wolfenstein 3D changed everything. Street Fighter 2 changed everything. One that I didn't see at the time that we just did was the Scum engine and LucasArts, Lucasfilm Games. Them in general just changed everything. TIE Fighter and X-Wing, I think, changed flight sims.
Any game that talked to me when I was a kid just was like, I cannot, like, we live in the future. This game talked.
Yeah, like Berserk.
Yeah, right. I was just a sucker for that. Like, I thought it was just so amazing. That shitty PC speaker voice, just like talking to you.
Yeah. The speaker voice for Parsec
Mm-hmm.
was in.
Oh, don't make me get my He-Man out.
I know. Tunnels of Doom was one because that was sort of my first RPG that I'd ever seen. So that it might not have changed the world because it was on the TI-99, but it definitely showed me things could be different.
Yeah, now you have stuff like VR. I think that's probably the most recent example of a revolutionary technology, and like you feel that it's in its infancy still when you use it, but like you're faced with the potential of it also.
Yeah, I go back to my 5 years. I fully think 2025 will be 24 to 26, somewhere in those cluster of years, those 3 years, VR will get its foothold. It's kind of there now with like flight sims and stuff, but like you tried to play Phasmophobia with it and like, I'm nauseous. It just doesn't have its audience and its type of game dialed in yet, or its cost dialed in yet.
Yep.
It's got another 5 years.
Do you feel like with the newer games, you have to use less imagination? Like, was that part of the charm of old games? You know, the old Atari games, you're looking at a few pixels, a few colors. You know, you had to use your imagination. Do you feel like you use less imagination with the newer games, or you just use it in a different way?
I think I can identify myself in modern games less, if that makes sense. Like when I played Pitfall, that was me. When I played Ultima characters, the little white blocks, those were me and they represented me. When I play Tomb Raider or The Witcher, I don't have that same me moment.
Yeah. Like there's something about sailing around on a boat in a in a tile-based RPG and imagining the mountains and like visualizing yourself on the boat. You don't get to do that anymore, but you can have way more experiences, I think, with modern games. And uh, there's something to be said for that. But I think as far as just like raw engagement of your imagination, I think it is way less now.
It can be. One of the things that I was thinking as you said that is stepping out of the vault in Fallout 3 for the first time and having been in this tight clustered space and walking out and suddenly seeing this giant open world in front of you. um it's a moment. It's a moment you'll hold on to. But that's the thing with good graphics. You will get moments. You'll get a moment like that, or you'll find a spot that they've tucked away where it's a moment like that, and the rest of it is the same grass tile. And because it's supposed to look real, it conversely doesn't. Where when you have something like Ultima, where all it's still just the same grass tile, but it's supposed to, you let it go and you just imagine grass. That's not what I want to do.
Okay. What about game developers? Do you have any favorite game developers, whether company or like designers?
Catherine Matega.
Yeah, we love Catherine Matega. She's worked on a lot of great stuff, and I think we feel like she's underappreciated. But I mean, I I don't really like. I'm really hesitant to follow anyone very closely because I've never been a person who has a lot of heroes. Like I tend to get disappointed. I I don't want to get emotionally invested in the next thing that someone's going to do, uh, because I just like I don't want to put that much of myself in it. So I appreciate people who are doing it for sure,
Mhm.
but I don't really follow anyone that closely.
I will say, in terms of game content creators, one more person I want to mention is Z Bradshaw. He does cartoons for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And even though I'm not thinking I'm ever going to RPG again, I do still like the content. It's kind of like owning the books and enjoying flipping through them, and he kind of gives me that. Game creators.
And it can be game creators from the past, like Michael
Yeah.
Cranford, Roberta Williams. I mean, it could be anybody. It's not just someone actively doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there was Gary. It's probably the person who got me into computers, so I got to at least honorably mention him. Um, I feel like with Gary, one of the things that's disappointing to me is not that I think he's different as a creator, but that he lets his, this sounds awful, but he lets his friends help. And because he does, I think some of his ambition gets pulled back, and we end up with less of what we could get as if he just said, we're doing it my way. Brian Fargo is one of those where if you told me 10 years ago he was going to be the guy as the bastion of old school role-playing style games from back in the day, and he's going to keep them relevant in modern times, would have lost a bet. I wouldn't have expected him to do that, but he does, and he's definitely out there keeping that going. I'm trying to think anybody else from back then. The problem is, like, when we really started thinking about gaming and games that would really inspire us, I think at that point, games became team efforts, and the studios behind them found a way to do what Atari wished it could, which is squish the big names and just hide them in the game. So we don't really find out who we might really be interested in following. You got to look at like 5 or 6 of your favorite games and then go, okay, what common denominator developer they have, and who's going to spend time doing that.
What do you think about independent game developers versus the big game developers?
I think it's fantastic. Like there's something about one one person or a small group of people having a vision, and I think that's where the real creative content comes from. People, I think they're more willing to take risks. I can't speak highly enough about people who take that on, uh, because you can feel that they're passionate about what they're doing, and you don't really get that in the latest, you know, uh, whatever AAA Call of Duty game. Like they're great games, and people love them, and that's good, but you don't feel like it's someone's passion.
If I'm wrong about VR in 2025, it's only because indies have regained a level where the bedroom programmer or the small team is relevant again. And they're sort of creeping their way back there, but I'll be interested to see how well they do.
If you could give one piece of advice to a game developer, whether it's an independent one or a big game developer, what would that be?
Respect my time.
Yeah, follow your what you set out to do, but also accept pivots, because I think games tend to tell you what they want to be as you're making them. Like I believe that that's true of most projects, artistic projects. You have to listen to that, but and not lose what you set out to create in the first place.
Right. If you find yourself too far off point from where you originally intended to go, stop the project. Like, not doesn't mean throw out everything you have, but stop. Build a new project with wherever you're actually pointed at, and then build that way. Because if you're trying to build wherever, you're just going to find yourself all over and you're going to fall out. But yeah.
Good advice. If you could change one thing about the gaming industry, what would that be?
I mean,
one.
Only one. No, you can mention more if you want.
I think I would make it less toxic. Like the thing that I love about what we're doing is, like I said throughout this whole interview, is the people that are around it. Like they're good, nice people. And then you like hop on a Rust server and it's just like terrible. Like it sounds so hokey to say, but it doesn't need to be that mean. Like you can be earnest and nice to each other. Like it doesn't have to be horrible. And I get like it's funny sometimes, and there's a place for trash talking, but man, it doesn't need to be toxic. It doesn't need to come from such a bad place all the time.
Being mean is only funny when you know the person.
Mm-hmm.
Being mean is only funny when it's Matt giving me shit about standing in a doorway going, just get in there already for the game we're currently playing, or me going 2001 sucks. That back and forth is funny because there's a relationship and there's an establishment, and we know that it's not a judgment on the person. When you don't know someone and you're being mean, it doesn't reflect on them as much as it reflects on you.
Yeah, this contest of who can be the most awful all the time, just it's like it's not funny and it's not fun.
Mm-mm.
So
And
let's be done with that.
I think it's 90% of why you and I don't play something like PUBG or something. I just don't want that level of, I don't have time for it anymore. I'm 45, 6. I'm old and I don't have time.
Do you predict any big changes in the gaming industry in the future? And if so, what do you predict?
I think someone's going to nail down locomotion in VR, and I think that's going to potentially be a big deal. I don't know what else people are going to come up with. Like it seems to have become more evolutionary and less revolutionary as time marches on. Like I think a lot of the gigantic leaps forward have been taken, and now there's probably a few more in the wings, but I couldn't guess what they are.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing over time is there becomes less gold mines to hit that revolutionary thing. My suspect on what's going to actually change gaming is nothing people are necessarily going to be able to point at on the front end, but it's stuff like visual scripting and the consolidation behind game engines. An example I had heard one developer talk about, and a lot of them have mentioned this. Garriott's mentioned it. The guy who did Maniac Mansion mentioned it. And they compare themselves to the movie industry. If someone writes a script and they hand it to a director, that director goes and makes that movie, and they hire a cameraman, and that cameraman knows how to run that camera. It's the same. The people themselves might have their own flavor, their own take on it, but a camera is a camera, a script is a script, and you know how to interact with it. With coding, that's not true. You have to invent a new camera still. And there's a couple different flavors of camera. You can have Unreal, you can have Unity, you can have Godot, you can roll your own. There's always this sort of different, there's enough differences that you can't really just have a creative idea and implement it. And behind the scenes, you have to know something like C# or a programming language that requires you to know things. But with Unity acquiring Bolt, or I don't remember what Unreal scripting language is, but it's a visual scripting language. You drag boxes on, you put things in boxes, and you can code in there if you want, but you mostly don't have to. Opening that level of interaction to everyone is going to create games we can't even imagine. Because it's going to bring in people who just wouldn't have otherwise.
I think someone will probably bridge the gap between procedural generation and deliberate content better than it is now. Like when you sit down and play something procedurally generated, and no matter how good it is or whatever, you can tell you're in something that's not as intentional as a built world. And I think that's going to get a lot better, and that's pretty exciting.
I think too many people go all one way or all the other. They either script everything and end up with a very tight, small game, or they make it all procedural and everything ends up looking the same, but sprawled out. People who like have a series of XCOM kind of does this, where it's a series of things that look the same, but they click together in different ways. Will be more and more like it.
All right, guys. Well, that is the last question. So thank you so much for the interview. This was super exciting. I had a lot of fun, and hopefully all the people watching this video will go check out the Lost Sectors. It's a fantastic channel. I can't recommend it highly enough. So thanks again.
Thank you for that. We had a blast.
Yeah, it was fun.
My pleasure. So we'll be seeing you on the Lost Sectors.